Well, I think what was going on for me, it was just the layers and layers of the stressful situations that I was, quantifying of like, this is just life, like this is just what people deal with. And I feel like it's not as bad as what these other people are going through or these situations that you're hearing on the news. Like I have it pretty good. But the reality is a lot of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in our culture can be traumatic because we only think about trauma as big T trauma. And I think it took the big T trauma for me to shine a light on like, hey, all this other stuff that's been happening to you is affecting you and you need to look at it. Like that's the first step.
Welcome to Flip That Shit. Stacey Uhrig here. My guest today is Debbie Harrell. Hi, Debbie. How are you?
I am doing well. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good, good. So Debbie comes to us today as a trauma-informed coach. Her goal is to help really normalize trauma for people. And her company is called New World Normal, which I think is so awesome. And she's going to tell us how she built her coaching practice. But what I want to do is I want to bring you guys to 2017, because if you know anything about this podcast, you know that the purpose of this podcast is for people who I've kind of met, not really. Debbie and I only met for 5 minutes prior to this, like a couple of weeks ago, to come on and share a story of something that was impactful, something that was challenging, really difficult, that hindsight can see it was a gift and that there was a gift in the challenge, there was purpose in the pain. So when I did a pre-podcast interview with Debbie, she shared with me a story of something that happened to her in Las Vegas in 2017. And maybe, Debbie, you could share a little bit of that with us.
Definitely. I might back it up a little bit because in 2017 was such a crazy year for me, full of like the epitome of the roller coaster of life. In the spring, I lost my mom unexpectedly in the midst of me having these my own medical challenges that were pretty serious. At the time I'm like, oh, it's just, just the things we have to deal with as a woman. But then when I look back on it, I'm like, no, that was pretty significant. So all that was happening in 2017. I also took an amazing trip with my daughter. I went to these amazing music festivals with my friends. Music has always been a big part of my social life. Like I also think it's a little bit of my spiritual practice as well, because, when you're at a concert with everybody that loves the same music as you and you're in that collective space of oneness, like everybody is there together singing the music and just feeling the feels. So I've always really loved that. Fast forward to the fall of 2017, and I was at my last music festival of the season, so to speak. And it was in Las Vegas, and people may remember that is the year of the Las Vegas shooting, the largest mass shooting in our country's history at the time. I'm assuming it still is. So yes, very impactful, crazy year on its own, and then throw in a shooting for the icing on the cake. But still, I was in that mode of like, this is just life. These things happen, especially in America, right? Like we kind of normalize these mass shootings, which is a whole nother topic.
Right.
But I was fortunate that I live in a very small community, and the administrator at our local hospital had an active shooting incident that he was involved in. So he was very aware of how it impacts you. And so he got us all together immediately and started talking to us about how we'd be feeling and the importance of, taking care of ourselves and, taking advantage of all the therapy that was being offered at that time. And then he brought over a PTSD specialist to talk to us, which was amazing. Very informative. The gentleman gave us lots of information about how PTSD affects us and how we would be feeling and how we might be operating in our day-to-day life. And I was like, yes, check, check, check. All of this makes a lot of sense. The only thing that I was kind of caught on, I'm like, but I've been behaving like this for a while now, for years.
Yeah. So can we back up and talk about what were all the checks and how was it that you were behaving that you realized, holy shit, I've been walking with PTSD for a really long time?
because when my kids were young, I was the mom that was, like baking the cakes and doing the lunches and organized and very capable. And then it was just slowly petering off to where I was feeling like I was barely, I don't want to say barely functioning, because it wasn't that bad at that point. It did get to that point. Like I wasn't remembering things the way I used to. I just didn't have the motivation, like cooking dinner. Are you kidding me? Like, which used to be something fun, like I loved, because that's like a love language. You're taking care of your family. It feels good to cook for them. And now I'm like barely doing that. Like birthday cakes, I used to go crazy and like do all the decorations. And then it was like barely even acknowledging birthdays, like I was doing the bare minimum. I wasn't living the life that I wanted to live, and not even the life that I had been living. So then I didn't even have the awareness that was happening until he said that. And I was like, oh my gosh, this has been a problem for a while. What in the heck is all that about? Giving myself permission to then look at that, because without.
And what did you see when you started to look at that? Because I think this is really important for people to understand. Because when I'm talking to clients, so often they're like, I don't recognize myself. I'm usually super type A, super high functioning. I can get a lot of shit done in a slow amount of time, like in a short period of time. I'm usually very impactful and very productive. And yet in the last few years, I don't even know how to, I can't even make coffee and chew gum at the same time. Like I can't even figure out, like you said, how to make dinner when before I'd have the entire week planned. So what was it for you? What did you unravel for yourself that you felt led up to it? And what was going on? I think this is the more important part for people to understand. What did you learn was going on within you that was causing this inability to function, really?
Well, I think what was going on for me, it was just the layers and layers of the stressful situations that I was, quantifying of, like, this is just life, like this is just what people deal with. And I feel like it's not as bad as what these other people are going through, or these situations that you're hearing on the news. Like I have it pretty good, like this. But the reality is a lot of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis in our culture can be traumatic, because we only think about trauma as big T trauma. And I think it took the big T trauma for me to shine a light on, like, hey, all this other stuff that's been happening to you is affecting you, and you need to look at it. Like that's the first step.
Can you share what some of those smaller things were that were affecting you?
Well, aside from the childhood stuff that of course was never dealt with, because it wasn't that bad. And that was a big part of learning, like, it doesn't have to be that bad. And like, it could be bad and you still love your parents and know that they did the best they could, that dichotomy. But also leading up to, in 2009, I had gotten married, moved my two kids. I was a single mom before that, moved my two kids away from our community. Quickly found out that the person I married was not the person that they said they were. Like, it was all smoke and mirrors. It was all a lie. I was like, betrayal, infidelity, you name it. But here I am, like, okay, Debbie, you made your bed. You got to lie in it. You got to at least try, right? Then cue my oldest child was diagnosed with a serious medical condition, chronic, that is like going to change the way we live the rest of our lives. But got to deal with it. Just keep going. And it took me a couple of years to realize, like, I couldn't do this. So scrap this idea, move back to our community, which was good because it's very close knit. I felt very supported, but then there's also that layer of, shame that we are really good at carrying around of, like, I failed, like I had this big pie in the sky, fairy tale idea of what the remaining years were going to look like, the home I was going to provide for my kids, the experiences we were going to have. And it was all not true. And so I had to come back, and there was a little bit of that, I don't want to say tail between my legs, but it was, there's shame and guilt. And like, I did all that, disrupted my children's lives, and it was for naught.
Let me ask you a question that's coming to my mind. If other people's opinions didn't matter, would there be shame in that situation?
I don't think so. It's really hard to separate that, right? Because we all say like, well, it doesn't matter.
No, I know.
It
But
doesn't
as you
matter
were
what
saying
people say,
that,
but it really does.
well, as you were saying it, I was like thinking to myself, okay, where does the shame lie? What's the root of the shame? And is the shame the root of you having to go back into your community and everybody saying, what happened? What happened? What happened? I thought. And it always comes back to us, because then the message we send ourselves is, I should have known better. We take the blame. And that's where the shame is. I could have prevented this. I was ABCXYZ. Forget the fact that you were with somebody that was a liar and not being truthful, and that you were pretty much trustworthy. You
Oh yeah, I trusted him, and that doesn't
right.
weigh into the equation when I'm feeling the shame, right? Like a lot of it is,
right.
Like I said, I was a single mom. I was raised by a single mom, so like that childhood stuff, like there's some shame built in there because society,
Right.
like, well, you're supposed to come from a family with a mom and a dad, and they're married, and you know. So all of that was kind of carried from childhood, I'm sure. So that's the stacking, right? The
100%.
layers that are starting to form that really kind of piled onto me in 2009 in a way that I feel it started to affect my ability to function in my day-to-day life. That's when I really feel like it started to deteriorate. I of course didn't have an awareness that was happening, right? We're all in this dealing with today, trying to get through today, not really like looking like, wait, what's going around me? And so I was just being that productive member of society, you know, going to work, taking care of my kids at the bare minimum, right? You know, everyone's fed and clothed. And, you know, I might have gone from cooking actual dinners to top ramen and mac and cheese a lot more often, you know, so there's guilt and shame in that too. And then, when, you know, losing a parent, it was somewhat unexpectedly. There's some childhood trauma that came during that experience. Then my own medical, where I live on an island. So I was like life flighted from the island. So it was very dramatic. And, but then that summer was those lows and the highs, right? I was having these amazing fun experiences and these crazy shitty experiences, and still going along. And I feel a lot of it, was also distracting myself, like those busy high experiences, you know, going to the concerts, traveling, was really distracting me from focusing on my life, getting quiet. Well,
because what happens when our life gets quiet?
Right. We have to pay attention.
Right.
So I recognize that now. I didn't at the time. I was just having fun with my friends. This is what we do, you know?
And I think it was interesting what you were talking about before. You were talking about comparing struggle and, oh, mine isn't so bad, or this is not that big of a deal. And I think that is such an issue.
It's huge.
That, you know, we're constantly deprioritizing our own struggle for whatever the reason is. But recently, Gabor Mate put out a book called The Myth of Normal.
It is on my nightstand.
It's a beast.
It's huge.
It's a thick one. It's a big book, but I attest it to, you know, it being kind of a Bible, like it is, like The Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk is for me. And I've been chipping away slowly at the myth of normal. But the idea of the myth of normal, the subtitle has to do with something about trauma and illness in a toxic culture. And what the premise is what we are calling normal these days, not so fucking normal.
No, it's batshit crazy.
It's batshit crazy. And to go to the Las Vegas shooting, you know, for you to be like, well, I mean, it happens. And I'm like, no.
Well, it happens.
That's not.
Yeah, it happens. And
that's not the human experience, right?
It shouldn't be.
Right.
It should not be. And then unfortunately in our society, it is. It is. Our culture, it's like, yes,
and this
shootings
is the
happen.
problem. And this is why, you know, so many people are walking around so dysregulated, because our systems as human beings are simply trying to keep up with a normal that is toxic, a normal that's really not sustainable. Nobody's talking about it. And we're getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And there's more anxiety, more depression, more autoimmune, more chronic pain, more chronic fatigue than ever before. And I love the fact that he's addressing it.
It's huge. He is doing amazing work. Gosh, you said something in it. The autoimmunity. Like,
yeah,
because the bonus feature of the couple years after the shooting, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's. And it wasn't, I had the opportunity because of the shooting, to go to onsite, which I've dubbed my time there as therapy camp.
Can you explain to people what that is?
Onsite is an amazing facility. They have, one in Tennessee. I think they have a new one in San Diego, but they do a lot of personal development, therapeutic, programs, workshops. And it's the one I went to is set on this beautiful ranch in Tennessee. So you got the rolling hills and the trees and it's beautiful. And, they have a foundation that I believe the person that headed up the foundation's brother was a Columbine survivor. So she started an organization, an offshoot of Onsite, that raises funds to send mass shooting survivors to a program at Onsite called Triumph Over Tragedy.
Okay.
And so I know we talked a little about permission. This is one of the first big permissions I gave myself, was to apply to go to that because, who am I to take up that space? My experience wasn't that bad.
I'm so glad you're saying it exactly like that.
Yeah.
So say that again. Who am I?
Who am I to take up that space? My experience was not that bad. So why do I need to go to this week-long retreat? And luckily that came pretty deep into the work I'd started in early 2020 when I decided, like, this is not working. I need to step off this conveyor belt and figure out what the hell is going on with me. So that was probably almost a year of doing my work. And so I was able to give myself permission to, like, I'm going to follow this thread and, I can apply. They don't have to, if my experience isn't that bad, they don't have to accept me. Well, I got in and I went and it was amazing. And here's the long roundabout tie in to the physical health, the autoimmunity, because I'm at this facility with all other shooting survivors. And we're at lunch together and talking about our thyroid issues and our autoimmunity issues. And I'm like, I hadn't been diagnosed. I suspected at the time, but I hadn't actually been diagnosed. And we go back to our small group and we're talking to our therapist. And she's like, well, yeah, your adrenals are activated in a way that isn't normal, right? It's not the way your adrenal system's supposed to,
right.
You're not supposed to live in life or in, fight or flight mode, You're just supposed to go there every once in a while and, like, come back. And I was so freaking annoyed when she said that, because all of my doctors knew my experience and all my doctors knew I was having these crazy, weird symptoms. And how come nobody said that to me?
This is a big part of the problem. And, as someone that's super trauma informed like yourself, I know you do follow Gabor Mate. We do follow people like Bessel van der Kolk, both of who are MDs. And they're the ones that are calling bullshit and saying everybody needs to get their head out of the sand. They don't teach any trauma-informed knowledge at all in medical school. Mm-hmm. But yet, what if you're an ER doctor and you're in triage 24/7 and you're not trauma-informed and you're treating the body, not the person?
Well, and not to mention you're now traumatized because, like, working in that environment on a regular basis, you can't be unaffected by that.
Well, I'll tell you this. So my experience with autoimmune was in April of 2020, after we had all been at home for 6 weeks already, like baking like nobody's business, right? Like we're like, oh, we're just going to be home for a month. I'm just going to make as much banana bread as possible and teach myself how to make scones. I mean, this was crazy just to try to keep the peace in the house with two teenagers trying to school, right? And I started getting all this deep, strange, uncomfortable pain in my joints, in very specific joints and very specific parts of the joints. And it was really very, very painful and very uncomfortable. And so I thought, oh, it's probably because I'm eating too much gluten. Oh, it's probably because I'm eating too much sugar. So I'm cutting these things out, and the pain is epic. And not only is the pain epic, but the deep, extreme fatigue starts to kick in, where I can't keep my eyes open during the day. And I feel like every single cell feels like a raisin and is completely depleted of life. And I don't know what's going on because that's not normally me. And it takes about 6 months. And I finally receive a diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. And I get into the car after that diagnosis. And the first thing I do is I Google ACEs and autoimmune, and I Google ACEs and rheumatoid arthritis. So if people are listening and they don't know what ACEs is, ACE, ACEE, ACES, really, is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And the CDC and Kaiser Permanente did a study in the 90s on people that were going into the hospitals and into clinics and into ER settings. They would have them fill out this form of 10 questions that had to do with their home environment before they were 18. And they were starting to correlate certain health issues to certain ACEs scores. And the adverse childhood experience scoring basically tells how much trauma you had as a child. And they're starting to realize there's a physiological effect on the body.
Slowly starting to realize.
Very slowly. So I look this up and I'm like, holy crap. Any score over 2, you have a 50% chance. Or no, maybe it was any score over 2, you had a 20% chance. And every score over that was like another 40% or something. Whatever it was, my score is somewhere between a 4 and a 5, depending on the scale. And that gave me an 80% higher likelihood of being diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis because it's deep inflammation inside your body. And when you talk about fight or flight, I was probably in a perpetual state of fight or flight for 8 straight years from ages 11 to 20. Mm-hmm. And just because the incident is over doesn't mean my body goes, oh, we can relax now, because now the body's so used to being so hypervigilant on my behalf. I suffered with that sensation in my body into my mid-30s.
Yeah.
So it was no wonder that after, 25, 30 years of constant fight or flight, constant in my body, that was going to take a toll.
Yep. It is a thing. And it is a little hopeful. Like we talked about, they're slowly figuring it out. The Surgeon General in California actually has added ACEs to the pediatric.
That's Nadine Burke, right?
I don't know her name.
So Nadine Burke Harris wrote a book called The Deepest Well. And this is how I first became introduced to ACEs.
Okay.
Because she had a clinic in Oakland and she was like, what the hell am I seeing? This is like late 80s, early 90s. And it was before the study came out, she was starting to put the pieces together that the experiences in the home environment were having a negative impact. Specifically, she was seeing it in children with asthma and pulmonary issues. And at around the time that she was putting the pieces together, the CDC paper came out. And she built an entire clinic around it. So I think that she is your Surgeon General or has been your Surgeon General at some point and is trying to bring ACEs awareness into the general public.
It's hopeful because and I'm trying to think of what's the best way to go. But when I got my diagnosis, it was basically because of my intuition and the work I'd been doing leading up to starting to feel crappy. I pushed her to test me for Hashimoto's. She's like, you don't have Hashimoto's. Your joints hurt just because you're getting older. And I'm like, no. It's not like that. And then basically because they caught it early enough that it hasn't trashed my thyroid yet. So my thyroid is still functioning. She's like, there's really nothing I can do for you. I could just come back and test your levels. And then once your thyroid stops working, we'll give you medication. I'm like, you've got to that's the standard of care. Good luck. And this was a doctor that I really respect. And I know she's super smart and has helped me.
But they're not informed.
And so then you have to do the deep dive into, for me, it was a lot of leaning into my intuition, which led me to like, your body is toxic, and then starting these detox protocols that are the only things that have really helped. But that came after, like I said, I started my deep dive on course correcting my life, if you will, in 2020, prior to the pandemic. It was late night 2019 when I officially stepped off of the conveyor belt of productive capitalist society and like, okay, got to figure this out. And then that was a whole tailspin of like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? And then cue the pandemic when everybody else was like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I'm like, hey, welcome. It's not that bad. We're going to be fine.
I love it.
And the beauty is, go ahead.
I
was going to say, and the beauty of that time is there were a lot of people offering, like a lot of coaches. I hadn't worked with a lot of coaches. I'd been working with therapists and really honestly not finding one that was really helpful in that period of time. So I started working with coaches and they're offering all these personal development, like free workshops and courses. I was like, well, this is fun. Like I'm going to do this for a while. And then found myself in this business development one and was really struggling with like, I don't just want to make money. Like I was coming up with, once I gave myself permission again to become,
I love it. Permission granted
to become an entrepreneur. I like all these ideas because, I'd been in the business world for decades. I was productive and successful. So I was like, I have all these great ideas of how I can make money, but I don't want to do any of those. I don't want to just make money. The world is like starving for people to have an impact and make these big systemic changes that we all know are necessary. But we're all stuck in that rut of like being who we are. Like I have to do this, so I don't have time to even think about that. Well, but doing this isn't leading me or the collective anywhere towards that world that I think the majority of us want. And so, telling myself to take more time and keep peeling back and keep doing the work, which led me to like, first initially was the New World Normal podcast. Like I want to give back. Everyone was so freaked out about this new normal and how terrible it was going to be. And I'm like, was the old normal that great? Like,
right.
Wasn't it kind of screwed up too? Like, don't we have some say in our futures and the future that we want? Like, don't our choices, lead us in certain ways? So that was the idea of the podcast. But then it's like, well, making money with the podcast isn't really the simplest thing to do. So more peeling back. All along, the coaching thing was in the background, but it was terrifying to me. Again, who am I to help other people?
Yeah. I think that that's probably a big question that a lot of coaches ask. I know I asked myself that question. And I went to different therapists that I knew. I went to different coaches that I knew. And I kept sharing with them my worry about, well, why would anybody want to work with me? And they're like, well, why wouldn't they want to work with you?
That's exactly the thing. Because eventually it got to the point of, well, who are you not to? Like I said in the beginning of like, I feel like the world is starving for people that want to make an impact and make these shifts. And I'm feeling called in a way to do that.
Right.
So who am I not to do it? Like if it's your calling and it can have an impact, I feel like it's somewhat of a moral imperative. Like,
Well,
you,
we're kind of indoctrinated with this idea of who do you think you are?
Mhm.
You don't have a degree in this. You don't have any expertise in it. Who do you think you are? And we've heard this for decades and decades and decades. And so there's a little bit of programming and conditioning that just pops up that's like, well, who do I think I am? And at the end of the day, it's like, well, I'm someone that's really smart and creative, and I have an idea. And I also know I have the capability to listen and hold space and offer great advice. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah. And the fact that now I can look back. I've had this crazy life experience. I've made my way through. I've developed, tools and ways of coping with the craziness. Like that is of value.
Of course.
Sharing it with other
so
people
you
is
develop
like,
this business, right?
uh-huh.
And what does that look like for you? You do it in the middle of the pandemic?
In the middle of the pandemic, I'm still working on my spiraling and myself, like doing my work. That's where the idea started. And I think I posted my trailer for my podcast because I started with that idea. And then I'm like, no, that's scary and big. I'm going to do these other things. Like I started an intentional apparel line, which it was, soft clothes for hard times. So it was like
It's really kind of good.
It's I love it. I have a bunch of the pieces still. Like I had, like it was cozy clothes with positive messaging, like keep going. I have, my big one was just an intention word because everyone does intention words for the new year, and put it on your shirt and it reminds you like this is what I'm trying to embody. This is what I'm trying to invoke in my day. So I still think it's a great idea, but it wasn't like my passion. It wasn't like filling me up. And so and then of course I had other like dog product ideas because I'm a dog home, as you've probably heard in the background. All these ideas running scared from the New World Normal idea. And then finally I was like, that's really where my heart is. That's really where I want to go.
But isn't it funny that it is the thing that's the scariest, that is the thing we need to be doing the most? And you're going to have all these different parts that are showing up that are like, you don't want to do this. What if people find out that you don't know what you're doing? What if people find out you've just become a coach? Like all of these different parts are going to show up trying to freak you out and give you all this self-doubt. But it's the thing that is the loudest that is still drawing you closer that you're like, I'm going to have to just doubt the fear and just go all in.
Well, and another thing I would encourage people listening to pay attention to, are the signs. Like we started this conversation with the signs from the universe. Like I didn't really want to go live on Facebook, and bada boom, bada bing, we're not live on Facebook. But
right.
I know it sounds woo woo and crazy, but those things happen along the path when you're on the right path. Like there'll be the little thread to like, I'm not really sure if I should go this way. This is scary. And then something will happen that'll be like, oh, I'll take another step in that direction.
You know what it was for me? It was, the discomfort of the accolade.
Ooh.
So before I launched my business, I did a soft launch. And the way that I did it was I offered 5 women 3 months of coaching at no charge. Oh. And they knew exactly what I was doing. I was offering them my coaching services, no charge, to test the waters, to get a flow going, to get feedback, to hone my ability to listen, to hone my ability to give advice with the idea that I'd get whatever feedback I needed. Right. And it kind of just it gave me a little bit more of that courage to say, I'm going to do this. I was starting to get really positive feedback, and it was really uncomfortable. You're in the right place. This is what I was hearing. You're in the right place. You're doing the right thing. You're really good at that. That just changed my life. That was impactful. I'm a different person because of this. And I was like, whoa, like I can just remember the discomfort going up my spine, because as much as I felt so called to this, I did not like receiving And then I was working with an energy healer, and she said to me, "You're not good at receiving." And that same day, this is those signs, right? That same day, I got an email from someone that was singing praises. And I wrote back to her and I said, "Thank you. And I'm going to receive that because I've been told I'm not good at this. And I know I'm not good at this. And I'm just going to say thank you. Not, oh my God, it's nothing." Like whatever it is we normally want to say.
I'm really big at making a joke out of it or minimizing it. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it just was such an uncomfortable feeling. And I had to really sit with that part and be like, what is that? Why am I so uncomfortable with praise? Why am I so uncomfortable? Because I didn't really receive a lot of it growing up.
You're always waiting for that other shoe to drop. Like, wait a minute, why are you being so nice?
It was really uncomfortable. So that's something I had to get over. But that was the sign to me that I was on the right path when people were saying thank you. And this was life-changing and that was impactful. And I'm not the same person in a good way.
I feel it's all so huge. And it, even though it's difficult to hear and accept and receive, it gets in there, even when we're trying to resist it. And that feeling and those ripples like we're having with our clients are going to ripple out into the world and create more change and more positivity. And I know that sounds kind of cheesy, but we have to believe that's true because we're all just so desperate for some sort of change and feeling unstuck and like we're living our lives, not just surviving.
But don't you think what it is that people are longing and desiring for the most is a deep, meaningful connection?
Definitely. 100%.
And I'm just trying to figure out where did that get lost in translation?
I think the hugest one they need to connect with is themselves. And that's the first one for us to disconnect from. We don't have time to
100%.
connect with. We're not that important. Like you said earlier about prioritizing our needs, I think, but I was also thinking like, we don't even prioritize our feelings. Like I have this feeling, but that's not valid. Okay. Yeah. No.
Well, but think about this. Growing up, how many times, I mean, I'm 51 this year. How many times in my 50 years of life did I hear, "Oh, you don't really feel that way. Oh, you don't really mean that.
Or you're fine. You're fine.
Or don't feel that. You shouldn't feel that." Like if I said, "Oh, I'm really stressed out about this," or "I'm really scared," or "I'm sad," you shouldn't feel that way.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, whatever the reason was that a parent was sharing that, because that's usually who's sharing that, they have their own shit, right? Mm-hmm. So either they don't want to hear the truth or they can't cope and deal with it. So if you speak the truth, now they're going to have to hear it. So let's just, we don't want to do that.
Yes, we don't have time for that feeling.
Yeah, but that really did not allow us to do the feelings. And so the reality is I feel, and tell me if this is what you're doing, but I feel that as a trauma specialist and as someone who really gets deep into childhood development trauma with adults, why are we stuck? Let's go backwards here just for a short minute. We're not going to stay there, but let's talk about the patterning so we can break the pattern, right? Mm-hmm. What I've learned is that as young children, it could be when we were even pre-verbal, we will shed a piece of ourselves in order to meet the needs of our caretaker so our needs will be met.
Because it's survival for us at that point.
And when we see it works, we're going to stick with it. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to do it again and again and again. And so even though you don't notice it, the way I see it is like these little transparent, translucent scales of us just shedding. And by the time someone comes to me, they're a piece of themselves, but they're not whole. And so what I try to do is I try to help them go back and see what were the pieces that you shed and why. I had one client that said, "I was just so joyful as a child, but my family would always say, 'You're too much.
Too much.
Just dim it down. Why do you have to be so much?'" Can't you just stop? Can't you just be like the rest of us? And she didn't feel like she fit in. So what did she do? She shapeshifted. She transformed, because it's the death of whatever if you don't feel like you fit into your own family.
I will have to say that that's probably one of the hardest parts of doing your own work. I know it was for me, doing my work and realizing the ways I fell short as a parent, even with the best intentions, and knowing
100%.
even at the time I knew I was doing better than my parents were doing. Still so many areas that I fell short. And it's funny with my kids now. I'll be like, I know, like this area, like I kind of screwed up. Feel free to talk about that with a therapist. Please. Please know I was doing my best, and you will do better than me. And
that's it. And that's because my sister has much younger kids than I do. There's a 13-year age gap between the two of us, and her kids are 3 and 5. And she's like, are we going to just fuck up our kids? And I was like, yeah,
definitely.
We're totally going to fuck up our kids. I was like, I do this for a living and my kids are totally fucked up. No, I'm kidding. My kids are not totally fucked up. But the reality is there's no such thing as perfect parenting, number one. So anybody that's trying to do perfect parenting, you're just going to have to stop, because it doesn't exist. We're human beings, not human doings. We are going to make mistakes. The kicker, and what I was saying to my sister, is you're going to lose your shit. You're going to say something, you're going to do something, and it's something you're not going to be super proud of. And the best thing that you can do, if you're mindful of it in the moment, is just turn around and say, that was not my best self. That wasn't my best moment. And in retrospect, I would have liked to have done it this way. And by the way, this had nothing to do with you. I was having a problem at work today, or I didn't sleep well last night. You know, we have to really be honest with our children, because our children will internalize it and make them about themselves, right? And so even now, I can't go back and take back all the things I said and did that I can see in hindsight weren't the best. But what I can tell my kids is, listen, I've learned a lot in the last 5 years. And now that I know better, I can do better. And so maybe you're not so keen to come to me about A, B, C, and D, because in the past my reaction was X. I'm asking you for grace and asking you to slowly move back towards me in those areas so I can show you I can show up differently. But it's a process.
It is a process, but it does work. And they do notice, like I feel my kids notice me responding in different ways, you know, responding more rather than reacting, right? Like
bingo. And I just had a conversation with my son. I forget what it was about. And I asked him point blank, do you see the difference in my reaction to what just happened compared to, say, if this had happened 4 years ago? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, great. I hope that that's a good data point for you to know. You can keep coming to me about these things, because my one kid learned just not to do it.
Well,
right?
also
and I had to take ownership of that.
Right. And it's also a clear demonstration to them that you can make changes
100%.
anytime in your life.
Look, our ultimate goal as parents is to show our children how to be good humans. And we are mistake-filled, but we're also grace-filled. So if we can show them, like, this is how you navigate life, and when something goes a certain way, you have the ability to voice a difference, and vice versa. It's got to be done. So we could go on and on and on about this forever, which I would enjoy doing. But in the essence of time, what I'd love for you to do is just share a little bit about your specific coaching methodology, how people can find you, if there's anything unique that you offer that you can share with them so they can reach out to you if they feel like it's a good connect for them.
I love that. Thank you. And I appreciate the time. My main method for my coaching practice is all about alignment, because I believe we're all good people in our core and we want good things. And despite what the current media presents, I feel we're more alike than different. And I love to support my clients in reconnecting with themselves, tapping into those values, and starting to make the shifts so that they can live in alignment with those values. Like so many times we're trying to fit ourselves into these little societal and cultural boxes that we feel we need to fit in that are so out of alignment. And that is making us sick, mentally, emotionally,
1,000%.
physically. So let's stop that, figure out what we really want and start to take steps, even if they're tiny little steps. It could be in our personal life. It can be, I love helping people build businesses as well. And then the place that I'm finding where I'm focusing the most in the next few months is my community space called The Collective, because we know it's going to take this collective movement to make these shifts that we want. And also, coaching isn't always accessible to everybody, right? Because there's a cost involved. So my community is a lower entry fee. I'm maintaining my founding member price for the end of this year. And the founding member price is $20.20 because that's the year it all started, $20.20 a month. We're doing weekly intention setting. These are live meetings. We get together on Sundays. I call them Dream and Plan Sundays. We're reflecting on the week that has passed, celebrating the little wins, the big wins, reflecting on the things that didn't go quite the way we wanted, regrouping. We're then spending some time planning the week ahead, whether you're like planning details like time blocking or you're just journaling about a feeling you want to hold on to in the week ahead. And then we're spending a little time on accountability and just fellowship, connecting with each other. And those are happening every week. And I'm for myself, like I know when I miss one, I'm like, ooh, I can feel it. Like I just feel off. And I feel like a lot of my clients are enjoying them on that level as well. And then I'll be launching some one-on-one packages in the next month or two. And then, of course, my podcast is a great way. It's been super cathartic for me. The last several years have been very overwhelming with I feel it's been kind of chaotic and like everything pulling your attention, all of these things that need improving or changing. And that takes time, space, mental bandwidth, and they're pulling us in all these directions. And I love that I get to spend time with people who are in their work trying to shift the needle to more inclusive and holistic way of living and being together.
So Debbie, what is the name of your podcast if people want to find it?
The podcast is New World Normal.
Okay. And that can be found wherever podcasts are
all
downloaded.
The podcast places. And The Collective is The Collective by New World Normal, nwncollective.com. And then, yes, I hang out on Instagram the most. My Instagram handle is Live More Aligned. And then the New World Norm is for the New World Normal.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
This has been amazing. I'm so sad that my cat cut it short a little bit, but I think we're towards the end anyways.
No, she's good. She's good. So I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to Debbie for being on the podcast and for sharing so courageously with us, not only her experience, but her ability to reflect and say, this wasn't actually the catapult or the catalyst of the experience. It gave you the ability to go back and see this had been something you'd been struggling with for a really, really long time. And I think that is going to resonate with a lot of people. And again, if people are interested in Debbie, they can go check out her podcast at New World Normal. And her website is NWN. Is that correct?
Collective.
NWNcollective.com. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. You can find this podcast and all podcasts where our podcasts are found. Just search Flip That Shit. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll stay tuned for the next episode.